So, and actually, I don't come to this session with any agenda. I didn't suggest this session, so I sort of leave it in your hands of how you think we should organize this. It could just be anyone sort of starts asking questions, and I'm going to have suggestions of how we should organize this session. Well, first of all, I care a lot about that it gets out to the world because I feel so. I sure care about that a lot, although there's limited range of things that we have a relatively small group. There's only certain things that we can do. So I want to be supportive of all those efforts, but there's only so much that we can be doing directly. And also it's going to be different in different places, so there needs to be more different people come with different approaches that are going to work in different contexts and different places. So I think we want to be supportive of other people doing things. Again, within my group, it also varies a little bit on just what different people in my group decide to focus on. I mentioned Karen Brennan, who's a student in our group, who now is a professor at Harvard. So she's focused more on how Scratch gets used in school settings in particular, and has developed both various professional development activities for educators, and as a curriculum guide, and certain assessment tools that she's developed. So I've worked with her on some of those things. So we have certain things, but even the things that Karen does is one instance. We know that there's going to be lots of other people doing things. So I think we'd like to figure out how can we be supportive of other people doing things. Even when Karen started the Scratch Ed website, so Karen started this, if you're not familiar, the Scratch Ed website for educators, it's a place where the curricula and assessment tools that Karen and her group are developing can be highlighted there. But her main goal is to allow the whole community to suggest other things. So if you go to the Scratch Ed website, you'll see lots of other people showing the different types of rubrics that they've used in their classrooms, just trying to support the community and sharing with one another. So I think it's really important to do that. I don't think that I have as much expertise as some other people, but I want to try to support that whenever way I can. Does that make sense? So, first of all, just with the accounts, you should know on Scratch, although you have to give an email address, you could just give your email address for all of your student accounts. That's fine. You can do that. So even if your students don't have email addresses, that shouldn't stop you from them getting Scratch accounts if you want it. We are also working on Educator, what we're calling Educator accounts, that it's behind schedule. It should come out in the coming months, but it's taking us longer than we want to. Partly, it's a hard challenge because different educators want different things in Educator accounts. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start with something pretty minimal that will at least make it easier for an educator to be able to have lots of student accounts. So make it easier to set it up. Because an educator could just set up all the accounts at once. It'll make it easier for the educator to see, like have a gallery or a studio that has all the student projects go to the same place, so you can see it that way.
Or organized by class.
Or organized by class, yes, it'll be organized by class. So it'll have those basic features.
That'd be great.
And
the third piece would be assessment.
Yeah, well that won't be our educator account. So
what we did was just set up a Scratch studio, and I enroll all my kids in my studio.
Yeah, and you could create your own email list.
Yeah.
Yep.
A space where all your kids can just put their projects.
Okay, I haven't really used it yet.
No, I'm saying if you just create an email for your class and then have all your projects organized by the class.
I have 450 kids. I see all
Oh,
this.
you're not a class, you're a whole school.
Yeah.
So
Is there
562 kids.
Is there a bulk upload feature or not yet? So I have to individually make 450 accounts.
So the way it is right now, you or you have your students do it. You could have your students, do it. Make a new Gmail. I mean, one thing that some teachers do is make up some new Gmail for third period class, whatever, at gmail.com. Make a new email address. Tell all the students to make a Scratch account using that email address. So that way you have each of your students make their account and use that
Some teachers made a case for yesterday for putting in your address because then you get email notifications, or if they do something inappropriate, like cyberbullying or those kinds of things.
Yeah, so you can do that. Just use your email account. I hesitate at this whether you want to share whether you want to give your email account to all the kids, but it's going to be fine.
It's on our class. It's on our class website. The parents all have it.
Yeah, so it's fine to do that. With the Educator accounts, we're trying to make it even easier to do sort of bulk creation.
Yeah, because I have a CSV file.
Yeah.
Because I have to create accounts for all kinds of things, and it's just funny how people overlook when you have to do hundreds and hundreds of kids, how time consuming that is.
Yeah.
Again, more.
Are you teaching vocabulary?
I hope so. One of the things that might be needed to really satisfy all the things we're looking for, because it's not clear that, my guess is that my group at MIT and even Karen's group at Harvard might be more likely to do it, but still won't do exactly what you do, because there's a lot of other things she's trying to get done. I think it's also trying to attract other people to put together some of those and use some of what we have as raw materials for putting together better things. So I think one thing we're looking for is more partners. So if you know of people who might be interested in doing some of that, I think we'd be happy to support people like that, work together with people like that.
That's what I mean. If it can't be done by, the MIT lab, maybe there are a dedicated group of 8 educators or something who would be willing to put that up and take what you've already done and do a modification and then test that out and do feedback.
See, I think that would be great. We'd be happy to support that in any way we can. One of the persons
might a central place where it's posted so that other people can reference it.
Well, two play. One is I'm sure Karen and Scratch would be happy to post it, even if they don't take the lead on it. I'm sure she'd be delighted to post it, highlight it, support it in whatever way. So I do think the Scratch Ed team would be good to talk to about that. Just to mention one other thing which there should at least be in the loop on it is, I mentioned Lisa O'Brien, who's now Executive Director of Coach Learn Foundation. They're going to do more, they're going to post some things. Coach Learn's just getting its website started. They're going to have more advocacy material, so it's more about trying to help people understand why this is important. So they're not going to have the detail for what educators are going to need, but more, they might have things there about what educators could use to help convince their administrators of why this is important, or what parents could use to help convince schools why it is important. But they might also have links to various things. They might post things there, but they aren't going to take the lead on developing the pathways they're talking about. But I think they'd be interested in supporting it. We were talking earlier, Lisa was talking to the group from Kentucky that's here, and she saw that on the Coach Learn website they're going to do sort of stories, sort of journalistic stories, videos, and write-ups about interesting uses of Scratch. So I think they'd like to have here's some different schools who are using it differently. So it won't really tell the educators, here's a curriculum to follow, but I think what they do want to do is to have a variety of stories, videos that show, here's very different contexts that are using Scratch in different ways, so at least you can find out about all the different ways it's getting used. But they're less likely to really document in detail what an educator would need, so that's something that would need to be done differently. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, but I think educators would really appreciate that support because
So we've done a lot of things with the Lego company over the years. So we've worked with them on various types of robotics kits like Lego Mindstorms and Lego We Do for younger kids. So is one of the things we do with them is thinking about how you can maintain the Lego spirit as we start to connect more with the digital world. So that's what some of those robotics kits are intended for. We're also doing some things now of having things that are just on the screen using Lego graphic assets, of doing Scratch-like programming, of having different Lego minifigs, make Lego minifigs dance and things like that. One thing we're thinking about right now is how we might do things with younger kids. As you might know, we have Scratch Junior is some software we came up with an app this summer for age 5 to 7. And right now, Scratch Junior is just on the iPad. We're going to have an Android version. We're thinking about connecting to the physical world. Our inclination is to do more with where on the tablet, I can make characters come alive on the screen, and I can make the lights turn on in the world, physical lights turn on. And so I might build a castle and maybe even embed the tablet inside the castle. And there'll be like a little animation of the prince and princess moving around on the screen, and then lights turn on and the door physically opens. So things like that are the types of things that we're working on. One thing that some other people are doing that we've experimented with, I'm not sure if you were referring to this type of thing or not, we've decided not to go down this path as much, although other people are, is actually tangible programming. It's like take the actual programming blocks and have physical blocks for the programming. Although we did some of that, we found it sort of limiting. It was fine for a demonstration. It was nice to demonstrate it, but we found that we prefer to keep the programming on the screen. So we're not doing things with the tangible programming, but more connecting programming to control things in the physical world. I think that we want to do more. I have a great relationship with the Lego company, and I'm very happy and proud of a lot of things they do. I sometimes feel that they focus too much on just motors and gears. I think there's a lot more that can be done in the physical world with light and color and sound, and it would attract a broader range of people. So we're always pushing to see how we can, in connecting programming to the physical world, don't think as much just about engineering type of things, but think more of making craft-like things come alive. So make it an interactive sculpture that comes alive and makes sounds when you come near it, and lights up when the temperature goes down and things like that.
We just
I think it's a good question. Actually, it reminded me of a story that had an impact on me. As you know, Scratch was very influenced by the Logo programming language, and some of you at least probably know and did some things with Logo that was developed by Seymour Papert, who was my mentor. And when Logo got out to the world in a big way in the 1980s, it got used in quite a few schools. And I remember that Marvin Minsky was one of the founders of artificial intelligence, who was asked what he thought of Logo. And he said, well, it's nice grammar, but there's no literature. And what he meant by that is that it's a nice programming language, but he was making exactly the point you were making. At least that's how I interpret it. When there's no literature, the reason you get inspired to write is that you read literature, and that makes you, you get inspired. And so you learn by reading the great literature. And that was one of the things that led us to want to make a Scratch online community. We want people not just to create their own projects, but to have a literature out there. So the Scratch website is a step towards having a literature. But your point is a good one. That the good news is there's 7 million projects. The bad news is there's 7 million projects. Because there's a lot of noise out there. If you randomly pick a project, it'll be either poorly done or non-understandable. And it's not necessarily good things to learn from if you just randomly pick a project. Small steps that we've taken, so I think there's a real need, and I don't have an answer yet, but as small steps that we took is, we used to, in the earlier version of Scratch, we included a bunch of sample projects. In the earlier version, we had to download Scratch. We had a bunch of sample projects, and we chose those projects mostly for inspiration, to show examples of what types of things are possible. And we didn't pay as much attention to making sure that the code was really understandable and good to learn from. So when we came out with the latest version of Scratch, we now have pages that are called starter projects. And the starter projects are explicitly done to be very understandable code, and ones that are good ones that you can help you get started on doing your own projects. So that's at least sales part of the problem. So if you go to help on Scratch, there'll be a link to the starter projects. And it divides into different genres, games, animations, art, different types of projects. It has like 3 or 4 of each. So there's like between a dozen and 20 starter projects. They think are pretty good to just getting an understanding of how do I make a project like that, and then you can extend the project. They also came up before about, do you just start with a blank screen and you build on things? These are all intended to be ones that you can understand and then modify or extend. So I think that's a step in that direction. What we don't have yet is so those are starter projects. we don't have well-done inspirational projects. So I think there's also a need to have, we have inspirational projects. If you just look at the featured projects on the homepage, those are inspirational, but they're not always understandable. So I think we could use more projects that are inspirational and understandable. So I think there is a need there, but I think we're making steps in that direction.
I just want.
As far as graphical programming in general, you mentioned before Snap, like that's colleagues of ours at University of California, Berkeley, who sort of took the basics of Scratch, and to be upfront about it, they kept trying to convince us to put more advanced features of Scratch. And we resisted because we didn't want Scratch to be intimidating for beginners. So we sort of have been really careful not to get dragged upward. When I said before, like, as much as I love little bits, they are getting dragged upwards. We didn't want to get dragged, and with Lego also, Lego Mindstorms, I feel has gotten dragged upwards too much. We really don't want to get dragged upwards. So we resisted adding advanced computer science features. And I think it was a good solution. That what they did was they took what we did and then added on to it and made a separate language called Snap, which is very nicely done and has more advanced computer science features. And people want more advanced computer science features, they can do it. You can't share in our community. That's one of the challenges. So I think it's unfortunate that they can't have a community around it. Right now, we're not focused on a Scratch 3.0. It's more continue to extend what we have now incrementally. One thing which connects with some of the things with the physical computing, there's another session on, we're having this so-called extension mechanism for Scratch to make it easier for developers to add Scratch blocks. So like if someone has a new robotics kit, they could make their own blocks to get added to Scratch. The people can then import that. In addition to connect to the physical world, you can connect to online data sources. So if someone wants to make Scratch blocks that access the National Weather Service, so you can get real-time temperature data and put it in your Scratch. So what we're doing is we're trying to make this whole way that makes it easy to extend Scratch, to sort of the moving upward. That's sort of the moving upward that we're doing, is with these extensions. There's a lot that's going on there. There are a lot of challenges with that. So you can imagine, lots of people are making extensions. Well, what if some of them don't work well? What if there's a lot of confusion around it? So we're going to have to curate some of that. How do we curate all these extensions people are doing? So there's issues we're sorting out, but that's one way we're going upwards. Well, it's hard time. I do think eventually, my guess is, I do think in the coming years there'll be more states that do come with state standards. So I do think there'll be some state standards. They'll happen, probably less likely federal, but I do think there'll be some states. In Massachusetts, there's a real push to do some of that. So I've seen some of it. I have been actively involved. The thing that I'm less clear about, and I think they'll happen in different places, how much should be focused on computer science? Because I'm a little worried for my own agenda is I'm not as focused on computer science standards will probably come in high school. There'll be some computer science standards in high schools that might come up. I'm more interested, as you can tell from my opening remarks, of getting, computing integrated into all aspects of the curriculum from early grades. That's less likely to happen by having standards, because it's easier to think about computer science standards. It's harder to think about standards that gets integrated into curriculum, but that's what I'm more interested in. So I don't know the answer to it. Again, I really do think, for me, what I would love to see in the long term, but I'm not sure how to get there, really taking the analogy to writing seriously, that as kids get started in early elementary school, to learn how to use computational tools to express themselves as they do with writing. So it's really like an extension of writing. So part of it could be, and actually we've talked a lot with the National Writing Project. I don't know if you know the National Writing Project. It's a great organization that's around supporting of writing in schools. And the National Writing Project has a lot of interest in coding. And in talking to them, I really like to connect with them because there's, in my mind, I like to see coding as an extension of writing. It's just another way of expressing your ideas. So the same thing that the National Writing Project cares about are things that I care about. So I find myself sometimes more aligned with the National Writing Project than with computer science groups. But exactly how to really get that integrated into the schools, I think, is a challenge. Whether it's because to building on top of writing, I think is interesting, but it's hard to make that happen. So I'm not quite sure the best way of making it happen.
Things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, and I didn't really go into it, but when I talk about coding to learn, or what is it we want them to learn? And for me, it is sort of those more general skills about solving problems, designing projects, communicating ideas. It's much more that than about iteration or conditionals or variables, which again, it's not, you have to learn about conditionals and variables to do coding.
That's just one source.
Right, but what's more important is solving problems, designing projects, communicating ideas. And that's the type of stuff that it sounds like. How do you break down a complex project into smaller, simpler parts? And, things like that. When something goes wrong, how do you try to fix, figure out, identify the problem and fix it when something goes wrong? Those are the types. One thing I was going to say about the goals with Scratch and with a lot of other projects we work on, I say we want to help young people learn to think creatively, reason systematically, and work collaboratively. So that's like a triplet I often say over and over. Think creatively, reason systematically, work collaboratively. And it's not that I want to elevate one over the other, but I think all of those are important. And they want to, these aren't totally distinct. Part of thinking creatively is reasoning systematically. But I think sometimes I worry that the way that computer science is taught and the way science and engineering are taught is oftentimes just in terms of learn the algorithm and apply it. Learn the method and make it happen. Too often things happen that way. And for me, I really want to make sure that my top level goals, I think we live in a society where it's changing so quickly, everyone needs to grow up learning to be a creative thinker, to be able to think and act creatively. Everyone's going to be confronted with unexpected situations or problems in the future because things are changing so quickly. So no matter any particular things you learn now, you're going to need to be able to adapt and learn new things in the future. And that's what I see as this creative thinking. So one point is, I think creative thinking has to be one of the important goals of whatever we're doing. So it can't just be about learning the specific content, it can't just be about learning specific problem-solving strategies. It has to be generally about creative thinking strategies as part of what the goals are. The second point would be is that people have such a wide range of different interests, backgrounds, and styles. And we have to make sure that people from all different backgrounds, interests, and styles all have pathways for getting engaged in these sorts of activities. So I worry sometimes that the way that robotics is introduced, the way computer programming is introduced, appeals much more to some people than to other people. So if you do a class and say, or if you do an after-school club and say, come build and program a robot, you're going to attract some people more than other people. Along gender lines is one of the ways, but along other lines as well. Whereas if you say, come and create a fantasy city, you'll create other people, you'll get other people. But both of those might involve robotic devices and programming. So for me, it's really important to provide multiple pathways, multiple avenues of entry. So it's not so much that I think that the arts approach is in making sure that you have sort of rich media is the better approach, but it helps broaden the range of who it is they're going to engage with it. And I think, actually, I'm sensitive to this, not because that's the way I was growing up. It's actually, when I was growing up, I was one of those little kids, I could just get into the abstract math things, and I would have been excited. In fact, my first programming was very abstract and generating lists of prime numbers and stuff that wouldn't appeal to a lot of kids. I got into it. But I think I'm very aware that a lot of kids would not get into it that way. I want to make sure it's really has pathways for many different kids from all different backgrounds, all different interests, all different styles. So I think that's sort of the most important point.
I see. Any last questions, or should we just say thank you, Professor?
Thank you.